Good morning, everybody. Have a seat, Faina. Good morning, everyone. Not a big crowd, but I hope you have a lot of questions for us. So, with me, jury members here, Professor Asaf Zohar. He's from Tel Aviv University. Robert Hamilton from Arizona State University. Tang Jie from Shanghai Conservatory. Sofia Guliak, famous pianist. And Faina Lustak from Tulane University, and myself. Sofia also teaches in London RCM and in Bolzano. Not anymore, okay. Different places. So, the way it's going to work, basically we want you to be able to ask what you feel, that if you have any questions for the jury. The purpose of this meeting is not to discuss why this person or this person didn't pass in the competition, or why this one win and this one not. The purpose is maybe to just make it a kind of a discussion with the jury about what values or what important things they search for when judging competitions, or in their professional life, or when they're teaching, or anything that comes to your mind that you would like to ask. And the way we organize it is there's a microphone here, so if anybody has a question, the best thing to do, because it's also live streamed, is to come to the microphone and ask your question to the microphone. Otherwise, it won't be heard, okay? So, and then I'll pass the mic between the jury members. So, do we have anybody who wants to start? Anyone? Margaret. So would you take the microphone here? And then you can pass. Anybody who wants to answer can grab this.
Good morning. I have certainly enjoyed different aspects of this incredible competition, and I am certainly renewed in the beauty that youth are sharing with the world. My question is, as master teachers, how do you guide and encourage students to express their individual creative voice within the context of the composer?
Very good question. Anybody wants to start? Yeah.
Well, you know, I think a talented person, if you feel his personality or her personality, individuality, has always something to say. And you feel it, you see it, you hear that. And the thing is that they have to respect style, the different styles, you know, diverse styles. That's why you have, as a teacher, also to guide him to be polite with a composer and with a style. So, you know, of course, you can't push too much to kind of stop his personality to develop, but this is the balance which good teacher, I think, has to feel. Yes, sure.
I think it's very important also not just to develop the taste in music, but it's very important that the even a child would be exposed to the beautiful different styles of in painting, in literature, that he would understand that this style. What is style? You know, what is the romantic writing? What is the romantic painting? What is the classical painting or Renaissance? So it would be not just the music, because this would, I would say, unfortunately, I met students who are not only 9 or 10 years old, but older, who don't have any clue about any styles in painting or in architecture, and it's all connected. And I think it's very important to develop interest in child, understanding of style, how to treat it in the whole art, not just the music.
If I may add something, I think a good teacher or capable teacher have to know when, how, and what to tell the students to do or not to do. I think that's very important. Because even during this competition, we see some competitor maybe is doing something that he or she probably shouldn't do to the composer. So that's how the teacher should tell the student that not to do something to play for this piece. And then maybe to keep the individuality of the students, and then the teacher should withhold what you want to say to him or her, that maybe we save it for later to tell them. And we have to have the patience.
Okay. What I would add, I guess, teaching is an individual thing, and there are such teachers, we might call them method teachers, who have certain formulas that they teach all of their students, and it can be very effective and very quick. For me, to the heart of your question, I think it's important to not squelch the individual personalities, but encourage them, try to figure out what the strengths are of each student, and to not force my own views on them. Of course, we have to start with the text, and the students must be very thorough in studying and understanding, excuse me, also the period from which it comes, and so on. But that in itself is not enough. As we all know, we have to interpret, and when a composer says, for example, play forte, the first thing our students should say is, how much? Not assume forte, oh yes, there it is. Because we don't really know. We have to listen. We don't know exactly what Chopin meant when he wrote forte, whether it's or ah, and that's up to us to interpret. So I think that combines starting with the text, but understanding that much, if not most, of the work has to be from us individually.
Well, you have stolen all my ideas already. I think that the teacher is the most important role in the development of the student. It's not what the teacher says, sometimes it's what he doesn't say. He needs to know exactly how to guide it. A good teacher is a person who stimulates the student to develop, to enlarge the frames, a good teacher, the student works for him in a way, because he stimulates him, he just opens the world for him. Now there are several kinds of teachers. There are teachers who teaches the work, who teaches how to play appassionata. There are teachers who teaches the student. So they don't give the same lesson all the time to each student how to play appassionata, but they are approaching the student, his needs, his capabilities, his fortes or shortcomings. I think that I would like to relate to what my good friend Faina Lushtak said. It's so important to know the variety of art, but I would go first and begin with, if I'm speaking about a Beethoven sonata, for example. So you can't learn or play a Beethoven sonata without knowing Beethoven symphonies or Beethoven quartets or Fidelio or what other things Beethoven did to understand the scope, and then all other arts. But we'll continue with it later.
Well, a lot of good things being said, and I agree with all of them. But maybe a few more anecdotes. I remember once my late teacher, Pnina Salzman, who was a very famous Israeli pianist, came back from judging a competition. And I asked her how it was. And she said, well, you know, everybody plays urtext. It's boring. So I said, what do you mean by that? She said, they're not projecting something personal. So, and I understand what Margaret asked the question, what she means to. Personally, when I work with myself with a student, when they come to a lesson, I'll say after they play, well, I'm not hearing you. What do you have to say about that? I mean, how do you play this? What do you feel about this? And I have my students actually work with exaggerations, which means I let them do more than needed. Let them do sometimes way more than needed, and then balance it down. It reminds me of my first piano teacher used to make me play everything really loud and really big. And she said, if you can make loud, you can make small. But if you always work small, you can't make loud. So you have to do more. Do more, you can always minimize. So more in emotions, more in your ideas, more in your inner, thoughts. The other things I use a lot of what we have today to offer, which is recordings. I mean, recordings on YouTube, but I monitor it, which means I tell my students, I sit with them in the lesson. I don't just send them home and say, go listen on YouTube to somebody. I look on YouTube and I said, look at who's there, and we go through a list of names. And we look for great artists, and sometimes young artists, young emerging artists. So people like, I don't know, Yuja Wang and Lang Lang, and in comparison, Gieseking and Horowitz and Rubinstein. And we look at the same piece and we listen 1 minute or two from each. And we say, what did you hear here? What did you hear here? What's different between this one and this one? And then I try to send them, go home and come back with something of your own after you heard all that, but don't copy any one of those, because I don't want copies. So that's, I think, one way to go about it. But the question is so good because that's what the essence is, to try and find an individual voice. So with that, let's move to the next question. There we go.
Hi. Yeah, this is my first opportunity to speak to a panel. And I just have lots and lots of questions, but it's probably because I have never done this before and I've never participated at your end. But when you first come together as a panel, do you start with some agreed upon criteria? I mean, are you all judging from the same slate? Are you all looking for elements of style? Are you looking for individuality, like Dr. Mary was saying? Are you looking for things that, how do you separate, I guess, one student from the next? It's got to be a daunting task to begin with, because to my ear, these are all extremely talented young people, and I'm enjoying all of it. But I'm not hearing what you're hearing, and I often wonder, so how do you establish some kind of criteria, or do you, among yourselves? And then from there, how do you differentiate that among yourselves? And then how do you come together and coalesce and come to a consensus about those criteria?
Well, I think first of all, we probably don't all come to a consensus. I think we all have our viewpoints. We all have our slates of what we find important, and I think there are as many slates probably as there are judges. That's what makes it difficult, and this is not judging a horse race, so there is no clear winner. Excuse me. I always advise my students when they ask how to view competitions. I say, don't pay much attention to the rankings, but look at it as an organization. It wants to help somebody, or some few prize winners. They want to give them some money to help advance their careers, concerts and things like that. And they assemble a group of experienced people to select. And they say, select someone who's worthy. And it's clear to me in all the excuse me, competitions I've both been in as a contestant and as a judge, that each panel is likely to come up with, or very often will come up with a different winner. So I don't know if that helps, but sometimes we agree, and two or three of us will feel the same way, and two or three will feel the opposite, and that's not only common. I think it's almost 100% the way it is. So I don't know if that is disappointing, but it's like a bouquet of different approaches. It's one of the strengths of music that a bunch of artists looking to bring out the truth and the essence of a piece of music will arrive at different ways of doing it. And that promotes music, keeps it from becoming sterile and boring. It would not be very interesting if all of us played a nocturne in the same way. And so the frozen arts, like architecture and painting, are frozen, and they're always the same. But music can be interpreted in so many different ways, and as long as each interpreter is trying to find the essence and not just show off, then I think music wins. That's how I see it.
Many competitors go to many competitions. Sometimes they go from one competition to the other. Sometimes the same competitor, same DNA, can win first prize in one competition and be eliminated in the first round in the next competition a month later. So with the same works. Yes. Same works. I tell you, I don't know if I'm very politically correct with what I'm going to say, but I think that some of the blame about it is that that is why I think this competition is very unique, because I don't like judge competitions very much. I must tell you, because it's very strainful, and sometimes you have to sit from beginning to end when you don't like someone, and it's hard, and you need to be in focus all the time, and it's hard. And there are some judges that are professional judges, and they go from competition to competition, and they judge the same artists with the same pieces, and there's nothing new. What I like in this competition, I tell you, I was here 2 years ago, and I did not judge any other competitions in these 2 years. I'm glad to be here because it was all new to me. I did not know anyone. I think there was one competitor that I remembered from last competition, but that was it. For me, everything was fresh and new. And I think that I try to, when I judge someone, to bring my own ideas and my own taste, and to really ask myself, is this the next artist? Is this the next artist I would go and buy a ticket in a winter night, go out of my comfortable couch and want to hear it? Does it do something for me? And sometimes there will be pianists that are maybe better, but they don't speak to me. So it can be personal, it can be individual. And I think that a good competition, I get to know my colleagues, and I must tell you, we had disagreements afterwards. We say, oh no, he did, oh no. And nobody's 100% happy, because it's a combination, it's an average of thoughts, but that's the idea, and that's the game. And we know it, the contestants know it, and if you can't bear the heat, don't get into the kitchen. So.
Once a high school student who studied with me went to a competition. She came back. She didn't win. but 2 weeks before she won. And she said, and she was just writing her essays for college. And she said, her mom said, oh, maybe you want to read her college essay. I said, okay. So I read it. And she compared sciences with music. She compared doing a lab work, and doing playing a piece of music, and going to a competition. And she said, and the point behind was, sciences are so different from arts, and that music, she said, it's not fair, it's subjective. And then she said, in science, it's yes or no. And then she went to college. She ended up being a professor at Yale nowadays in medicine. And she became a pathologist. And I met her years later, but she doesn't do with the dead, she does with cells. She examines cells. I met her years later, and she said, well, you know, even in science, we don't really know everything. I thought we did, but we don't. We still look at the cells, and 3 of us will say, yes, it's cancer, and the 4th one will say, no, it's not. So even in science, it's not so precise. That's years later. Now, music is subjective to a point, but in a competition, I think there are certain basics that we're looking for, and that has to do with the way the world has changed and evolved in the past maybe 70, 80 years. With recording technology, with media, with everything is expected to be perfect. And it doesn't mean that in a competition we have to look for perfect, but we are looking first of all for basic, what I will say, masterfulness of the instrument, how you approach the instrument, how you master your technique. That's a basic for me when I judge a competition. Even if I love somebody and they have a wonderful, wonderful artistic personality, but somehow they have not developed their given, they will not make a career, whether they want to or not, because the world has moved away from that. Maybe 80 years ago or 100 years ago, they would have made a career. But back then, being perfect was not so important. And it doesn't mean that they have to be super perfect, but they have to be on a very high level. That's why you see so many young pianists playing at this level. This was not common 100 years ago. Right? You would not hear in one competition 3 pianists play La Valse. That would not have happened. That would have happened maybe for some great pianists, famous virtuoso that will go and play La Valse. I don't know. That doesn't happen regularly. Nowadays, it's a norm, which means it's becoming a norm. Yeah, they're so young, they should do that. I mean, it's norm. Is it bad? I don't think so. I think we're moving forward. I'd like to see that actually we're moving forward in even higher and higher levels. But with that, we have to develop their artistry. And for me, it was yesterday the same thing, because I looked at that La Valse 3 times from young pianists. I said, okay, but which one talks to me more? That was for me. Maybe for somebody else talks differently. I'm not going to say which one talked to me more, but that's not the point. Point is you have that music and you try to relate to that. Now, with this competition, Asaf is right. There are so many times in competitions, the same judges going from competition to competition. They hear the same people. They know who they are. They know where they study. They know what they want. They know what they haven't won. And by the way, this is very accessible, because today you sit with your cell phone, you put a name, and you know every pianist in front of you, where he's from, what he's doing, and what he has won. So everything is accessible. Just like when you want to say something, you send a text or a WeChat, and it's immediately there. So this is how life has evolved and has moved forward. But I think when I think about this competition, I try to bring people that I trust their musical ear, which means they will look beyond just the technicality of things. They will look for the personal voice. They will look, and that's why if you read my letter, that is the intention of this competition. We're really trying to find somebody who has something special to offer. And I trust my colleagues that even though we disagree, and we do disagree sometimes, I'm not going to mention a name, but in the first round we had a very strong disagreement about one contestant, too extreme. It doesn't matter, but this is life. Because one person, sometimes people with strong personalities can convince somebody totally and really aggravate somebody else to the other side. And that happened to me on both sides. sometimes. You know, like I loved somebody or I really not like somebody. It's normal. So maybe, you know, maybe it says something. Maybe that person also, when they will go on stage, it will create the same thing with an audience. You know, so that reflected in the playing, and it's, I think, normal. I mean, it's natural. We're not even, and students are not even, and pianists are not even. They're all different. So, anybody else?
I would like to add, maybe for the specifics, because you asked how do we judge, let me refer you to something that you will all be, I'm sure, very attached immediately. When you hear an opera, a singer, it's not like to operate an instrument, which is you operate your instrument. The first thing you hear in a singer like Maria Callas, what makes a singer, first of all, is the voice. It's the quality of the voice. The same with piano. Sometimes from the first note, from the first, you know if the sound is unique. What is a unique sound? If it's rich, if it is singing tone, if the tone continues. So that's things that, of course, the more you're professional, you know the criteria, but everyone hears it. Then, these are the notes. Then how you connect the notes, the syntax, what do you do with the notes, where it goes. Then comes the harmony, it comes after, but you really hear it. And sometimes even audience, they pick up the right people. They pick up the right people. How? And of course, you're a very educated audience, you know music. But we are all for the same target, to find the artist that he speaks to us. And you know, it's very easy with singing. I took it as an example. But with piano playing is the same, or the violin, the way the violin vibrates, the way the sound continues. Same with piano. Then comes all the other things, style and respect of the text and all the things that you have to be professional as well. But that's the first things that immediately catches our throat, that for me are the most important.
I would like to add just a couple of things. I absolutely agree with you that the piano sounds completely different with every performer. And you may think, how come this is the same piano? But this is the whole thing. This is magic in that. Of course, you all know Sviatoslav Richter, greatest pianist of the 20th century. And Richter, in his book, he wrote that and you know that in Soviet Russia, Richter was sent by Moscow Concert Organization sometimes to play in the very remote area of Russia where even the grand piano would not exist. It would be upright, pretty bad. And Richter loved this upright. He said, you know, every stupid person can play pretty good on the wonderful grand piano. But I like to make a real friend from any upright piano. And this is what calls genius. So probably when Richter play on this upright piano, it sounds absolutely beautiful, even with comparing somebody else playing on the best Bösendorfer or Steinway. So, and I absolutely agree with you that from the first phrase, from the first touch, we witnessed that we witnessed very well that the piano starts sound absolutely different, and this is the magic, and this is probably connected with, I don't know if politically correct, I think it is talent, a real talent, ability to do that.
Maybe we should move on to another question, so we let people ask more questions. Gavin, do you have a question? Sure. Okay.
So my question is, are there any important skills nowadays for young musicians or artists to possess that competitions can't possibly screen? Is there anything that we need to know that maybe competitions need to change, or just through this medium we can't know if somebody has this or not? Okay. So like, are there any skills or abilities or knowledge that we think students or young performers need to have that we can't tell listening in a competition if they possess this or not?
I'm not sure I understand
Okay,
either.
that's okay.
Let's try to rephrase it in another way.
Yeah, I'll come back.
Okay. I'm not sure. Okay, next question.
Well, we have to try to address it.
Can I say something? Before this competition started, I was witness to something incredible, and that was the competition of the locals. I think that you have established this competition. That was we saw how it started, how a region, how a state is so diligent and so responsible in trying to, again, stimulate and develop the next generation. And, you know, making a competition, local competition, before the international competition, I thought it was incredible. And afterwards comes the international competition, and everyone can see where to look for. I think it was incredible. And we have seen some very promising people that maybe in the future will come to this competition, to the international one and to other international, but I was very, very impressed with that and grateful that we had the opportunity to witness to that. I mean, this is why I like to come to this place, not because of the great atmosphere, but the integrity of things that are done here. It's not an ordinary competition that are looking for, a competitor type, tour la force, someone that, I think that here they seek for a real musician. And you know how many later win other competitions that were in this competition before? Many winners, not only first prize, but other prizes, go afterwards to maybe more competitions that are not that are done for 50 years already, more established competition. I don't want to say better competition, more established, and and they do very well. So, and again, every competition is a learning experience. You learn new repertoire. You get the chance to develop the repertoire and to see how it works. And even if it is a smaller place, but all my colleagues here are established pianists and the highest rate musicians. And it was very honorable to sit with them. I was very, very honored and grateful. And I think, yeah. Well, you have all heard the first recital of Sophia, and she is a prize winner in competitions. You don't hear many recitals like that.
I'm curious about Gavin. Gavin is a very bright young man, and I think he's searching for something that we tried to understand. Are you saying that wondering if there's some kind of undercover or unexposed secrets or kinds of things that we are perceiving that isn't obvious just in the playing, and you're wondering what underlying factors there may be or something like that?
I think maybe more, I was thinking about it a little bit, more the question I wanted to ask, and something I was thinking about listening to this whole thing is, there's some incredible playing that's happened this last week. There are certain trends, like everybody wants to play the fastest tempo that they can in certain virtuoso works, and I think to an extent, that's great, but what we were saying about style and expression, the fastest tempo you can take doesn't always bring those things out, and so, let me think. Are competitions and competition culture pushing performance practice in a direction that's maybe detrimental to what we're looking for?
I think that's excellent, yeah. I think inevitably, yes. There's certainly some honor that some young people feel in being able to play a difficult work faster than anyone else. But I've always believed that beyond a certain speed, it's not only counterproductive, but rather ruinous to the music, because not only can people not really hear what's going on, but the inner rhythm and drive and excitement is spoiled, because beyond a certain speed, we cannot have good pulse, rhythmic excitement. Faina mentioned Richter. Richter is associated closely with Prokofiev, the Prokofiev sonatas. And I remember when I was young, going to hear him play in Washington, where I was at the time, the Prokofiev Sixth Sonata. And already, this is some years ago, but already young pianists were racing through it. And I was quite surprised and delighted to hear that his tempos were like yum ba-da-da, dum ba-da-da, dum. And he held that tempo all the way through the first movement, for example, and locked in. It was very exciting, much more exciting than da-da-da, da-da-da, dum, which is what we hear. So I think you're hitting on something very important, and that is certainly one of the drawbacks of competitions. There's no institution in the world that doesn't have its drawbacks, and competitions are certainly that way too. I mean, it's wonderful for the opportunities it gives. It's not wonderful when students leave and say, aha, I was number 4 and you were number 6 or something like that. In other words, thinking that rankings matter. But we have to try to encourage students also through our choices as juries to play with good taste and excitement, and not try to win laurels by being the fastest or loudest or whatever. But unfortunately, I think in every competition you see examples of students who are trying to win in that way, and intelligent juries will usually reject it.
I would like to probe this same question of this young man about personal expression. Perhaps he was thinking that competitors have an idea of what is occurring in competitions, local or international, but he's perceiving something new is occurring that the competitors don't know what is happening beyond, let's just say, dynamics or speed. So I would like to pose this question. When preparing students for a public performance or a competition, how do teachers cultivate a climate for promoting imagination and curiosity for the students to explore their personal, individual expression?
Sometimes it's very interesting. There are some documentaries that are done during a competition and they are released after a competition. And I've seen one of the leads piano competition of 1972. And they have interviewed with the same question the three winners. First one was Murray Pariah, was the first prize winner. Then it was Craig Shepard and Eugene Indich. They were the three prize winners. And I remember Pariah answered, and he asked him, are you playing different when you're playing in front of an audience, in a competition? He said, totally the same. It's not that in competition I'll try to impress the jury different than I treat it as a concert, regular concert for me. I'm playing for audience, I'm playing the instrument I love, the pieces that I love, and for me, it's like a regular concert and I'm doing what I love to do. So I don't think, I know that there are professors, and I will not mention names, that I know that they are very, very known for preparing people for competition, and they are feeding them with formulas, do that, don't do that, don't play too exaggerated because you will offend this, don't play too loud because they'll think you are banging, don't play too, too soft. I mean, you know, they give, just play the average so you will eventually raise up. I think that's bad. I don't know if I knew the formula for how to make a winner, I would be a millionaire. I think it's a lot to do with luck, because you come to a competition and it depends who your competitors are, and that depends who the judges are, and the atmosphere, and sometimes the audience can stimulate everything. You come on stage and you get a so warm welcome, and wow, you immediately you are raised to you inspired, and you do that. You know, it's so many factors.
Your question directly was relating to how do we cultivate a climate in the studio so that students will be encouraged, I think, to be expressive and express themselves and so on. And again, I think there are many answers to that. Partly working with each as an individual and encouraging each one to seeing what the student's trying to do and help the student to achieve that in a responsible way that is, you know, balanced and tasteful and not exaggerated in ways of getting way away from the composer's intentions and things. Of course, many of us have classes. Excuse me. We have studio classes in which they play for each other, and we encourage them to talk, and we talk too about what's going on in the music and what was good in the performance and what can use improvement and so on. Certainly encouraging students to read and listen to various forms of music. If they're playing Beethoven, they should be encouraged to try to be more familiar with all of Beethoven's output and so on, art, and there are many answers, I'm sure others have in which to cultivate that. But it's very important, because otherwise we are just playing games with speed and loudness and all that stuff.
You know, I work with a few high school kids, and many times we prepare for competitions, not because I like competitions, but because it stimulates them to do more and to achieve higher levels than if they would not. I mean, if they were just playing for themselves. Nowadays, kids need more stimulation than just that. But I think what happens, and in this way, as I've said, luck, and in this way I would have to disagree. Luck is only so big. I mean, luck, who is the jury and who are the competitors, only play a role, I would say, when the student is average and not when the student is exceptional. A student has to know that he has to arrive to an exceptional level. So when I work with a student to competition, I start with them from the way they walk to the door. I train them how you get out of the door. How do you walk out of the door to the piano? It doesn't just happen. How do you walk to the piano? How do you bow? How do you welcome your guests to the stage? I think it's very important because when you walk on the stage and you walk already, you're setting the atmosphere to what's going to come forward. What's we're listening. The moment we see you the first time, we already have an impression. That's the first impression. It's sometimes you can be maybe terrible, but the first impression could be wonderful. It can be misleading, but you have to welcome your audience because that's what we're here for. And then when you play, I say to my students, you cannot just count on being on stage and then it will happen. It's not going to happen on stage because often, especially young students, they come to the lesson and they just want to make sure that they're secure physically. You know, they work on the sound, they work on everything, but it lacks character. It lacks something beyond that. So I try to stimulate them in a lesson. I do it a lot because it's my personality. I dance a lot, I scream a lot, I jump a lot. If it's not enough, I scream more and more, things like that. It has to do with the personality, It also has to be the personality of the student in front of you because, you have to realize what you can draw out of the student. You want the student to do their maximum ability. So I think a pianist, when they go on stage, I tell my students, you need to shine. Otherwise, nobody's going to care. I had a student once who was very shy. I said to him, I'm honestly brutal. I said, the world is not going to go for a shy pianist. Nobody's going to go for a shy pianist. A pianist is like an actor. If you're shy and you cannot say your role on stage, you will not be an actor because you have to be able to transform. And the part that you're playing, the piece of music, is what you need to transform through, whether you're playing a Beethoven sonata or you're playing a Liszt virtuoso piece follet or some of those things we've heard. So we have to prepare ourselves to be to draw our audience in or a jury in. For me, it's the same. Audience or jury is the same. When I sit in a competition, I try to be audience, not jury, because we're humans. So it's just trying to make the student do their best, and I do think that they need to do it in a lesson or in a practice room. Practice your imagination, practice your sound, practice the beauty. Don't just play the notes perfectly clean. So Sophia wants to add something, I know, right?
No, a few years ago, not so long time ago, I was from another side of this competition world. I was competing quite a lot. And psychologically, of course, it's very difficult because in your brain you always have this information that in the competitions you have to play. It's different than the concert. And then I was just thinking a lot about that, and I was just like, it's your time to say something. You just go, you have opportunity to give a recital, to give a performance, and there are people in the audience who came to get probably a message from you. So try to talk to them with music, like with your sound, with your words. This is your time. And I was thinking, and I was kind of blaming myself. You're egoistic because you're thinking about yourself, that you're afraid, you are nervous, you're afraid that this passage probably you can forget something. Very stupid things in your head, unfortunately, very silly. And I know how difficult it is to overpass this feeling, but at the end, of course, you have to be very well prepared. You have to be secure, as Baruch said, because even if something happens, sometimes it could be noise in the hall, but it could kind of stop you, and you just can always try to convince yourself and try to think that you're on the stage to perform. And don't think, and I remember the citation in Leeds when you were coming to play, and they were all here, all the table, at least we are far, so, but it's not nice to see that. You see the jury right here, and nothing to do, I always say, don't think about that, just try to express yourself, try to give a performance. And as a judge, I try to consider it as a performance, as many concerts, bunch of concerts, but concerts. I'm not going to count each wrong note or each wrong passage or I don't know, whatever, wrong pedaling. Okay, we're all humans. That's the thing, I think. Okay. So don't think that for the competitions you just have to be fast and loud and perfect. No. Okay, we're humans, we want music. Okay, that's all.
I want to say something that might be strange a little bit, but I have a dream. I have a dream. You know, not much longer than Sophia. I'm a bit older than Sophia, and I was also a competitor. And I think that the most frightening and unpleasant thing about competition is the elimination process. That's very bad. You know, I see those that are eliminated, and I see their faces, and they come and ask me, that's terrible. If I had a sponsor, if I had a dream that it would be my ideal competition, that would be a competition that will be many pre-selections and bringing like 12 to 15 competitors only, and each of them will play in 4 rounds. 2 recital, 1 chamber music, and 1 or 2 concerti. I know it's very expensive because you have to hire an orchestra for this, but you will hear, listen, I can say that. And not many applications, but you know, you pick up really good pre-selection, and all of them are playing 5 concerts, and the jury can see in like a week, because this is what the real career is. Sometimes Sophia, who is concertizing a lot, told me, I have to play this month 7 different concertos with 7 different orchestras. I mean, this is what the pianists do. Because you are invited with this orchestra, and the other orchestra, Polini is ill, and they ask you to replace him, and you must say yes, otherwise they will not approach you again. You always say yes. And this is the real life. And they see if you can handle 5 different programs in 1 week or in 10 days, and then this is the real world. And no elimination, so you'll play in 5 concerts. You got to show what your strengths are. This for me would be the ideal competition, with good judges, of course, and then they'll pick up someone who is a complete, but that's expensive. But I said, I have a dream, but I wake up every morning and the dream is poof. So.
Well, that's a very good dream, because when you have 12 or 15, but you already had the elimination of others, and actually many others. So, and then probably we prefer people play in front of people, and then we eliminate, probably better than before they appear in front of the audience and you already, there's a majority of people got eliminated. But that's a very good idea, and I think there's some competitions already have done something like that. At least, you know, like some competitions, important competitions, they already do. The first 2 rounds, they don't eliminate anybody. So let the international participants, they play more instead of only 1 round and then got eliminated, and you know, so at least they play 2 rounds. But that's a very ideal thing to do, that if, you know, all the participants of one competition, they can play all of their repertoire in front of the audience and jury members. But that's gonna be definitely, for sure, it's gonna be very expensive, especially paid to the jury, I think.
I'd just like to add to that I have a feeling I'm not the only one who on several occasions completely reversed myself. In the first round, I really was not very impressed with somebody. I'm thinking particularly of of one situation where it was a total flip-flop for me. One of the contestants who I had put very much at the top after the first round, and another one that I had put at the bottom in the second round, it was flipped. And sometimes we have to swallow and be humble about this, but on the other hand, we didn't necessarily make a mistake. It's just that the students flip-flopped in the quality of their playing. Maybe they weren't prepared for one of the rounds as well as the other. Who knows? But that's a very interesting thing, and fits into what he was saying, that sometimes it would be more ideal to hear them more than once, and possibly we'd come out in the end with a different decision. Who knows?
Maybe other questions? Nate? Yeah.
Other judges come from different countries, and I would like to know how does your nationality influence your own interpretation of a certain composer? Yeah, I know Professor Zoha from Israel, and I searched it online, and you run a Beethoven program, and I am interested in how's your nationality or cultural background has been influenced on your interpretation of Beethoven, or my teacher, Professor Hamilton, and he had special interest in Bartok, probably, yeah. And how does your own experience or the country's background has influence on that? And Professor Tang Zhi from China, and I don't know what's his favorite composer, and also Professor Gayak and Sofia Gayak and Fiona Lashtak. They're from Russian, and I'm interested in the culture of Russian too. And I would like to know what's your favorite composer, and how will you use your artistry to introduce your own country's music, that's Russian or, yeah.
Who wants to start?
What is the heart of your question, Ning? Are you saying, what is the difference between when we play music of our own country and how we look at that versus other countries? Is that what you mean? Do we approach it differently, or? Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you want.
So my question is, how's your own experience, such like the culture influence that's on your artistry, forming your artistry, when you play a piece, for example, and I'm sure you have your own expectation of how you would like to interpret, put your own ideas or interpretation into this piece. To how much extent, so your culture or your I don't know how to say, your life experience gonna have because for example, if it's Beethoven sonata, and we know Beethoven is German, right? And because the performance is the second creativity, and everybody talking about the personal interpretation of a performer, and to how much you're gonna balance like the composer's idea and for your own understanding or interpretation according to your culture's background influence.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there are many ways to answer that, and many points to be made. I guess I would start by saying we think of music as the international language, and I think it's possible for me as an American to identify very closely with Rachmaninoff or Beethoven or something. I think when I've gone on tours, for instance, I remember particularly when I played in Germany, just getting there and hearing people speak German. Something happened to the way I thought of Beethoven, the way I played it. For me, that was interesting, and I've been in many other countries and had the same thing happen. So, of course, we would assume that we have the best identity with composers from our own countries, but I don't know. I'm always very interested with American music to see what people from other countries do with it, and I hope that those from other countries are also interested in how I, as an American, look at music from their country. I think, again, as I said earlier, that's one of the strengths of music, is that we have so many different approaches and so on. But there are other ways to answer you, and I think... Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe it's true that people, different nationalities, bring certain qualities or characteristics to their life, to their music, to whatever it is. So, for example, sometimes when we think about Russian musician, we think, oh, beautiful, very warm and expressive, very, very generous. But even that can have, Russia is a big country, People can have different personalities. There's what we call in piano music the schools of piano playing, like a French school, a German school, a Russian school. And these schools do have aesthetics. But, like Professor Hamilton said, and in his case, for example, he affiliates very much with Bartók as well as with other composers. But he's not Hungarian, and Bartók was from Hungary, right? Rachmaninov, what? Yeah, but he plays very well, Bartók, right? So I think what the ear or what connects is how you as a person identify to certain music, because to us it happens that we like something more than something else, And also I think for many pianists it changes with the years. Like you start with liking something more, and then as your life changes path, you go to something else. If we look at the competition, for example, we had special awards, right? The Russian work went to a Chinese girl. That's okay. Classical work went to a Chinese boy too. So what does it mean? It means that as people of the world, musicians are, and international, we learn different styles. And as musicians, we try to bring the styles of the music. Does that make sense? So definitely a Chinese boy can play beautiful Mozart, I think, right? Just like an American boy can play beautiful Chopin, So, but sometimes it's true, like, for example, Chopin competition. Sometimes they say, oh, the Polish, they know how to play Chopin. Oh, the Russians, they know how to play Russian music. Maybe in some level, but not anymore, Anymore in the world today is that people have advanced so much and music has advanced so much. Not only Rubinstein can play Chopin. So, that's my opinion. Okay. Yeah.
And right before I came over to the States, and I brought some students to play in St. Petersburg, Mariinsky Theater. And we specially designed the program that there are actually two concerts. One concert is concerto with Mariinsky Orchestra. So we especially designed the concerto. It's more kind of cultural exchange event that my student played one Rachmaninoff second concerto. That's representing, of course, Russian music in Russia. And also then we played Yellow River Piano Concerto, which is a Chinese piano concerto. Actually comprises the different style of Liszt, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff. So it's a good interaction with some and also actually the director of Mariinsky Piano International Festival. She said to me, she said, "Oh, that's the first time I heard the Yellow River. This is incredible music. So that's why we are also, the judges are sitting here, because we are coming from all different background and different culture, different countries. So, but we are agreeing on one common language, that is beautiful music. And also another concert we presented in St. Petersburg as a solo concert that I asked each of I had like 5 or 6 students, and each student play one Chinese solo composition and paired with other countries' music, for instance, Granados, Lieberman, and Rachmaninoff, or Chopin, Liszt, all from different countries. So one Chinese composition paired with another country's music. So representing actually the music now, so-called classical music, is really international. So it's shared. We are always talking about when we eat that we are sharing the food. But food is also culture, a big culture. And music, same thing, actually. Music is really, I always view music is really the same as food. Because when I go to different countries, I always try to get into the local culture. That the food comes first, because you always have to eat. And the music, same thing. It's very sensitive, very individualized. Even there's one same name of one dish, but with different cook, with different restaurant, they cook, the taste will be different. That's like Kung Pao chicken, yes. Right, so that's about music, because everyone, they play this same, Chopin Ballade #1 played differently. That's why we want to come to concert hall to listen to, Sofia Guliak or, Asaf to play the same piece, because that's one dish, but cooked by different chef. That's why we want to go to a different concert to listen.
Any other question? Yes, Betty.
Good morning. Mine is a little more technical question. There were several contestants who played the Brahms Paganini variations from Book 1. The variation was the one that followed the very beautiful high music box type variation, and it had glissandro octaves in it. Could you tell me, please, how you teach glissandro octaves to your students?
How you teach glissando octaves? Or how to play glissando octaves? Anyone?
Well, I've had experience. I used to, when I was younger, I toured with the Brahms Paganini variations, and so I've done it and I've taught it and so on. I think it depends on the individual. For some of us, glissandos are the easiest thing to do. I'm one of those. For others, there seems almost to be a mental block. I have a very close colleague that once, some years ago, and he's a terrific pianist, came and asked me how I did glissandos, and I said, well, you just do it, and and so anyway, I just said, well, show me what you do, and he did, and I said, I think you're digging in too much. Glissando is just like a wipe of the thing, and if you dig in, I think what happens to some people, glissandos or trills or something, they sound really brilliant, and maybe when someone's young, he or she hears it and thinks, oh my gosh, that's really hard, and they've got this mental block. I mean, even black key glissandos, which we have, for instance, in Alvarado Ravel, if you just treat it lightly and so on, it's very easy. There's a joke about, I think, was it Serkin or somebody who, before the glissandos in the Beethoven, Waldstein near the end, kind of was seen to sort of lick, just to make it a little smoother or something. So I mean, that for me that's one of the easiest glissandos of all to play. I mean, it's much harder when you do the black key ones, but I don't know if that answers. Yeah.
The secret with glissando lies with the piano. If it's too hard, it's almost impossible. Now, I have particularly not too big hands, like Rachmaninoff, big hands, So I remember more than 20 years ago, I was a secretary to the jury for the Rubinstein competition, and there was one judge, a legendary pianist by the name of Georgi Shandor, who was, I think he made the first appearance of Bartok III and of many, and he has edited a fantastic edition of all Prokofiev sonatas for all. And he once took me by the throat and said, "Now sit, I want to teach you how to make a glissando of octaves." Wow, show me. And then he had such a huge hand, and he just put the hands. You see, when you make a glissando, then sometimes with the fifth finger, you wipe, and with the thumb, you want to play on the nail. Now, some have big nails, some have very short. It's not very easy. So if I do this, I can barely catch 6. I cannot catch an octave. It's impossible. I have to do. And then he showed me, and he did something like this. But he had something so strong here, like a bone, and he made it. And what I made is a big wound that did not heal for 2 weeks. I never play octave glissando. In Waldstein, I play in 2 hands. In Beethoven concerto, I play it in 2 hands. Brahms, Paganini, forget it. My student played much better than I am. So there are some works that I do not touch, mainly when they have octave of glissando octaves.
That's an argument that teachers with small hands ought to, or students with small hands ought to study with teachers with small hands, and with big hands should study with big hand, because intuitively we understand more easily.
I think the idea of glissando came from a keyboard which is much lighter than this contemporary piano. So that's the first start, because that's where they started. It was not this kind of keyboard. And nowadays, you really have to trust that you'll have a light piano, otherwise you're in trouble. When I teach my students, I teach them both ways, so that when they try the piano, for example, in a Beethoven sonata, either they try it with or without, because it really, the lux is on the keyboard, on the weight of the keys. I think I was telling one of the jury, I had a student recital not too long ago, and one of my students finished with the Ginastera piece, the Opus 2. And there's a last glissando, and she played it always so wonderfully, and that's why I put it last in the program. And then she came to the glissando, and you go, boom, and nothing. And I was so upset. I was like, where was the glissando? The whole point of finishing the recital. Oh, I injured it right before in the practice room. I said, don't practice glissandos all the time, first of all, because if the piano is heavy, you don't need to do that. Yeah, so that's what glissando. It's really personal. In general, if you look for kind of, by the way, Shandor wrote a wonderful book about technique. Anybody should know. He gave it to me. I have the book, and he talks about a lot of rotations and stuff like that. But yes, he did have a big hand. And with glissandos in octaves are easy for bigger hand, the smaller hands. In fact, maybe not for very big hand, but your hand size has a lot to do with what's comfortable. A little bit on an octave would be good. So a little bit too big might be also not so good. So, Sofia, from experience, how do you feel about it?
Well, I personally try to use less meat, more nail. Yeah, if I can say so, yeah. So, yeah, because, and of course, you know, you have to consider it as an effect, right? Definitely, it's an effect. But pianos are so different, like, honestly, I still have this from my glissandos because the keyboard is quite slow, the action. So, and you know, some new pianos, they have so sharp keys, like it's really painful. You can't do, I mean, it all depends on piano. Some pianos is just nothing to do with it. And usually I use 2 fingers for glissando when it's just one, not an octave glissando. So, oh, where is the 6th? Oh, the Paganini number 5? This. So, I play with 2 hands. Somebody plays, I don't know, like they put like that, and of course you have to use more nail on the top voice, right? I mean, there's some, not a secret, it just depends on exactly on your hand, on the piano, on many things.
I remember in Rubinstein competition 25 years ago, one of the compulsory pieces was Alborada di Grazioso, and of course there's the double note glissando there. And I heard 50 versions of glissandos, literally. I mean, everybody does, stop, or turn around. I mean, so many different possibilities. Same with La Valse we heard the other day. If you take a video of the 3 kids who play La Valse and you look at how they did glissandos, you'll see 3 probably different things in timing, in how they take their hand. You just have to go slow motions. And if you ask them, I'm not so sure they really know what they're doing. You know, I think a lot of it is spontaneous, natural. So, once it's hard, don't play glissandos. That's what I will say. It's not going to work so well.
What's that?
Glissandos. If it's hard for you, you go to the piano and it's hard. Maybe don't do it. I mean, it's better to find the alternative. Most pieces have some alternative works. Or don't play the piece. You know.
So many pieces.
There are many. Yeah, we're not lacking repertoire. Okay, more questions?
I have one more
Yeah,
question. There has when I listened to the competition, and there's a girl, her name is Angie Zhang, and she played the Granados, the piano suite Goyescas. It's very impressive for me. And this piece, because this question is about the program music. Yeah, when we have a certain indication from the composer, such as like the Granados piano suite, and each suite is coming from a painting, a Spanish painting. Yeah. So I don't know. Will this limit the imagination or the interpretation when the competitor is playing? And I mean, because it's every piece is coming from a painting, and so this gives a very specific where the piece of the competition came from. And when such as teacher or judges, they judge how their performance is. So will this, the imagination or the sound image just be so specific? Just like the first one is a dialogue between the lovers. So will you imagine when she's playing, will you imagine, oh, this is the talking from between the 2 lovers? Yeah, so my question is that.
So I'll pass it along, but just in quick, I mean, many times in music, the paintings were by Goya. Many times in music, there are descriptions like that for art. For example, pictures at exhibition, they're also based on paintings. And always, the question is, it's a very good question. Do you imagine that when we listen?
Yeah.
I think that's not really the point. The point is that the pianist, when they play something, I think they need to be very aware of what it is, the painting. And then when they communicate, when they do communicate with the audience, I mean, we all have programs, but quite frankly, most of us don't read Spanish, right? So if the title is written in Spanish, we will never know what it is about, right? So the question is it important we know what it's about? I don't think so. I think for the composer it was important. He tried to evoke something. For the pianist who play the piece, it is important because they're trying to follow the composer's guidance. But what the audience perceives is what the audience perceives. I'll give it to you. It's not really, it doesn't have to be two lovers. It could be, and then it's beautiful, but it could be something else, as long as it communicated to you. Because the idea, that doesn't mean that you will know exactly what it's about.
It could be husband and wife.
Yeah, I once did an experiment with some people when I was younger, and people who were not musicians that didn't know music, and I did things like certain Debussy preludes which have titles and so on, and descriptive pieces. And I played, I don't know, half a dozen or something, and as I was playing, I thought very, very hard about, as I always do, what the image is. And the responses were scattered. Maybe occasionally somebody got it right, but for example, falling leaves can be falling water or whatever. I came away with the realization that, first of all, it does matter if the pianist has an image in mind, because if not, it's not going to have that spiritual quality which helps people to imagine themselves. But secondly, we shouldn't expect the precise, match with the listeners, that they're going to think exactly what we're thinking. But I would say if we're not thinking something along those lines, it's going to be mechanical and dull.
Well, I think programmatic, is that how you say it? Programmatic music is, I think we have to view this as the same as non-program music, because programmatic music that can suggest or depict something that to help us to understand what the composer want. But also, I think, let's say we see a title, let's say sonata. That doesn't mean it's not programmatic. Right. So the imagination, it comes not only from the title, but I think it also has to come with the music that you read.
Talking about Goyescas in particular, I'm sure you're aware of the history of Granados himself, how he died, for example. And that's the most heroic and tragic love story. Then he and his wife were on a boat, and then they were torpedoed, and she fell, and she fell, and he fell, and he jumped to rescue her, and they both lost their lives. And whenever you play Goyescas or listen to Goyescas, and you see the dance, the fandango to the candles, and the temptation, and then you have the death scene and something, you immediately, that's what stimulates you. And I think that in every music there is a story. You make your story. Cortot gave titles to every Chopin prelude. You don't have to agree with the titles, but wow, it stimulates you. And why not? I always, when I play something, I find a story. Debussy wrote the title of the preludes in the end, not even in the beginning. He wanted you to have it after you play it. So that was the idea. I mean, of course, now you know it before, but you are not supposed to.
And if you don't have a picture in your mind, what are you going to think about when you're playing? You're probably going to be thinking, I need to raise my little finger here, and oh, here comes a hard spot, and so on. And then, what is the audience going to get? Mechanicalism. So even with sonatas, I thoroughly agree. You have to always have it.
Reminds me, about 2 months ago, I was listening to some recording, and I saw a title. I wonder if my colleagues know about this. Do you know Chopin Wrong Note Etude? Chopin Wrong Note Etude? Yes. You do? You heard of it? Don't say. You heard of it? Anybody else heard of it? No. Okay. So I was listening. It was Opus 25, number 5. Whoever got it, maybe it's Corto's description, I doubt it, I don't know. But I remember that from that moment, when I heard that piece, I was like, I just hope it doesn't sound like the wrong note etude. Because when played badly, that's how it sounds. When played beautifully, it doesn't sound like that. It has a lot of dissonances. Go listen to Opus 25, number 5. Somebody gave it that title. I have no idea who it is. I've never heard of it before. Bob, you've heard of it. Do you know what the source is?
No.
Oh, maybe it's just...
I know Chopin frog etude.
Frog.
Blam, floop, floop, bum, 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 floop, floop. I heard people call it frog etude.
I like that.
Well, yeah, I think definitely the programmation could help you, could inspire you, but then it depends on your fantasy and your knowledge. If you play, I don't know, whatever, Chassenet's etude, it's not just an etude, right? But maybe you can feel a dying person, despair, the loneliness, personal tragedy. No? So it depends what you know about the composer. The piece you hate, actually, the Weinklagen variation. I mean, Baruch doesn't like this piece. We talked about that. But actually, it was composed after a very tragic moment of his death of somebody very close to him, you know, to Liszt. And so maybe if you know that, you will play differently, right? So again, we are coming back to the same thing. Like we have to know the background. You know, we have to know more about composer life. Or if you play pictures at the exhibition, it's not like pictures. They're very small. There is like, you know, nothing special, you know. But if you know Mussorgsky operas, if you know his life, his terrible life, you know, his poverty, his tragedy, his personal problems, probably you put more sense in it, right? It's not just bidlo, it's not just the animal, it's much more. Or loneliness and the old castle, it's not just something you see. It's something much more than just a simple drawing. So again, it all depends on what you have inside and what is your imagination, what is yours, how deep you can go. Better deeper, right?
So, yeah, and sometimes you mentioned a piece I did not like. Sometimes we like certain music and not like other. It doesn't mean we don't like the pianist playing them. But, you know, it's the piece itself. Like, you know how many times I sit in audition and hear, for me, Khachaturian Toccata, I can't stand this music. It drives me crazy, okay? It's like something about, maybe because I heard it so many times played so badly, that it's so hard to listen to it again and again, and yet we do, you know. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, but that has not, it's you know, personal taste of what one will choose. We all decide what we choose to play and what we don't choose to play. But we have to really wrap this up. So the question is, anybody has more questions? Maybe a last question? Anybody? Yes, please come forward. Can't see that far. Hi.
I wanted to ask you guys what the differences were of competition styles from now and when you guys were young artists, and also as like a follow-up, do you see any trends that might change how we adjudicate?
Between now and when we were young and in competitions, yeah, and in and participating, I assume, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any different trends?
Well, I'll take it. Yeah. Well, I'm easily the eldest here, and I was entering a lot of competitions back in the '60s. That was my time, and so I have a long range of experience. I think essentially there isn't a lot of difference. It's still the contestants still have to look at the competitions correctly, which is, you know, it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for one of us or several of us, and we're all happy for whoever gets the opportunity rather than coming away with a badge that I finished third and you finished sixth. In other words, it's not a horse race, as I said before, and so on. I think those essentials are still there. I think playing has changed. I'm old enough to remember the 1950s when I was still in school, and I remember going to hear a concert in New York when I was looking at schools by an Italian pianist by the name of Maria Tipo, and this was, in the early 50s, I think, something like that. And I listened to it, and I thought it was, I liked her playing, but I thought it was kind of pecky and with a lot of emphasis on being perfect. And these are things that I didn't grow up with. I grew up with listening to Rubinstein and Horowitz and Serkin and so on, and all the other great masters. I think personally something happened right around 1950. I think it happened, in my own opinion, because of the critic culture, because at that time, up until maybe 1980 or the 70s, critics literally made and broke careers. And many of the critics were not very fine musicians themselves. What they could do was bean counting. And they could tell when you made mistakes. And if you were not accurate, they would crucify you almost. And I think that had a large effect on playing. That's my personal opinion. So I would say that's different because it goes along with the stream of playing, that nowadays competitors are much more concerned about accuracy and fine points like that than we were back in the 60s, but although it was even changing at that point.
I think I mentioned before about some pieces that are like De La Valse we heard 4 times this week, including yours performance. I think repertoire has changed in competitions. It used to be rare. There's certain things that used to be rare, and nowadays they're very common. Like a pianist programming 12 or 24 Chopin etudes is normal nowadays. It was not normal in the 60s or 70s. You would hear 1, 2, 3 Chopin etudes. Even the great pianists of the past did not play all Chopin etudes or perform them, and Cortot, who did play them with a lot of wrong notes. So, Horowitz played some, Rubinstein a few. Yeah, Richter, we have a few. I mean, amazing Opus 10 number 4 when he was very young. So it's common to play really difficult repertoire by really young people and younger. So Paganini variations, also, we're not like every pianist play that. Nowadays, yes, it shows up. La Valse, etudes, by complete list etude you'll see in competition first round. These are things that have evolved and have changed, and I would presume would continue to change and continue to evolve. More and more difficult repertoire at a younger and younger age. This is what media and I think audience like to see. So audience respond to that. This kind of, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it is impressive to hear young pianists play all Chopin etudes. It's just incredible. And not just technically, but musically. And they can do it both. So that's the good thing about it. And in a way, make it harder for everybody. I mean, you kind of have to try and stay on the horse, comparing yourself to others when you go into competitions nowadays, because you see what other people program in their music. This is why, for example, in this competition, some competitions ask you for very set repertoire. We try to keep it open, and I think the trend today is to try to keep it more open, because it's also an opportunity for a pianist to show what they like to program. So you may have seen this week some pianists putting contemporary music, actually even things written in the past 10 years. For me, it's very interesting. I like to hear these kind of things. For other people, may not. or, you know, playing something which is more, I don't know, of different style, rather than Chopin, Liszt, and Rachmaninoff, but something a little different, you know. So, yeah, in that way, I think repertoire has evolved.
I think another thing that's changed is that in my day when I was entering competitions, if you won 2 or 3, you were something special. I had won several, and there was even an article in the New York Times about me because of that. Nowadays, if you haven't won 5 or 6 or 7, you haven't really got a start. So, in other words, now, you know, if you're going to go the competition circuit, you have to win a lot of them. In earlier times, if you won 1, sometimes that was enough to launch a career.
I think maybe with that we're already over time. I want to thank everybody for coming. I think it was very valuable. Got a lot of good questions, and I hope we were in some way helpful. So thank you for being here.